Good morning, fellow app makers. Behzad is here from Code Simplifier. Welcome back to another video of how to develop a tip calculation application using Kotlin languages in Android Studio. In today's video, we are going to discuss about errors known as bugs and talking about fixing an error known as debug. During developing your application, we have dealing with three types of bugs, which I divide them in three main groups, and I will explain them to you one by one. The first type of bug known as compile time error, in another word, is obvious error. And when does this compile time or obvious error will happen? It could be a typo or you write something down in a wrong order. And the good point is it can be detected by your IDE or your workbench area. For instance, if you write down your string class with lower s, that will be compile time error. And your workbench area, like in this example, our Android Studio area will show us an error, and you can just fix the error. This type of error or bug is very easy to detect and fix. The second one, known as unchecked runtime, in another word, is unseen error. In this type of error, there is no issue in the source code. That means you don't see any issue or getting any error. But the system will throw an error during the compile time, or known as building time. And that is where you know there is something in your source code and you need to fix it. And the third type of bug is known as logical. In another word, is difficult error. That means there is no issue in your source code. There is no issue during the compile time, but the result is different from what you expect from the outcome of your application. And this type of error is one of the hardest one which every developer has to face and always make you challenge. In summary, we have three type of bugs, and if we are solving those bugs, we known as a debugging. We have three main types. The first one is obvious error, which is very easy to fix. The second one is unseen error. That means there is no error or any issue with your source code, but during the building time you will see an error. The third one is one of the hardest part, and they're known as logical or difficult error. In this error, you don't see any error during the building time. There won't be any issue, but as I mentioned earlier, the result will be different from what you are expecting from your application. In saying that, let's move on to our application and test and find out what bug is and how we can debug an application. We don't see any error in this section of our application. How do we know that? By saying that there is no error in our source code, and whenever we're running our application, the application runs with no problem. And to just check out what it could go wrong, let's run our application in debug mode. So just go on top of application, do not play on that play button, just on a third one, is look like a ladybug. Just click on, and that will run our application in a debug mode. Here is our application. We are going to just put some number as our cost of service, and then press the button on our calculating, and it will calculate the tip amount that we are going to pay for our service. We toggle to just make sure everything's working. So far, there is no problem with our application, but let's say the user deletes the amount of the service cost and press the calculate. And as you see, our app crashed and stopped. So what just happened? That means we are facing a logical error, which, as I mentioned, is one of the hardest one every developer is facing and is hard to fix. But in this case, because we don't have many codes, it's easy to detect the error and fix it. Android Studio, it has some area which you can go and check to find out what went wrong during your runtime or testing your application, and is known as logcat. If you see the bottom here, you see a little tab here, it says logcat. Just click on it, and you see some random text which doesn't make much sense. So we are going to analyze this error and to find out what went wrong and how we can solve that problem. As you see, here is the error. We have to just, if we expand a little bit higher, scroll up until you see a fatal exception. That is where the start of our bug or our error we can see. Then scroll down until you see a number format exception. Is the third line from the top. I highlighted here, and we see an empty string. That means we have an empty string in our application. So basically here is because we are dealing with one of the simplest functionality. It's very easy to detect and solve the problem. An empty string, we have to find out where did we use a string and why it is an empty. I will give you a tip when you are facing a bug and how to debug. What I suggest you is always break down your application into smaller sections, then it will be easier to search what happened. So in this instance, we have to find out where did we use a string during our application, and we have to find it and to make sure what it went wrong. Here, let's go to break down our application into a smaller section. This is a screen. All we have to do is going back to our XML file to find out what values or what object did we use. Click on your activity main, and we have our string here. So the first one we used an edit text, and the second part was text view, radio group, we had switch, and we had button and text view. So text view, basically there is no issue because we didn't get any value for it. The button, again, we didn't get any value or any number into it. It just does one functionality. The switch, it works as a toggle between on and off. The radio group is just a selected object we have. The only place we used our string was edit text, the cost of the service, which is here. There is something wrong here. How did we find it? Is by just finding out it. Here is the only place we're getting some values or some entries or input from our user. Let's calculate the application and make it a face and having a crash. Go back to your logcat, bring it up, and here we saw an empty string. Then if you click on this link-wise things, it will just send you to the place which the system found a bug. The first one, it goes from top to bottom. Sorry, it goes from bottom to top. And here, the error started from calculate the tip. The second was what in this class of main activity, and the third one was in this line, the line of the cost of service. Here is the place the system found an error and crashed our application. The system indicates an issue here. To find out what went wrong, we have to check. Here we told the system to calculate the cost of service whenever there is a value, and we never mentioned to the system if the value was empty what to do. That's why our application, it crashes whenever there is no value in our cost of service and whenever the user presses the calculate button. And whenever you're developing your application, you have to always keep in mind that you are talking to a 3 years old or 5 years old kid, and you have to every step tell them what to do, because on their own they're not smart enough to make decisions. So here in our double section, we don't have anything to handle the error if the section of the cost of service was empty. So we have to fix this issue and then tell the system if the system or if this section was empty, what to do and how to move on without crashing our application. Kotlin gives us a functionality to handle a null object. What nulls mean? The null means there is no value for that part of the system or that section that you are going to use. And you have to clarify whenever the system faces a null section what to do. So come to your cost service in our calculating tip. To the end of to double, just write down this section or null. And that is basically we are telling the Android device or our application, if there is a cost of service, do this. And if there is no cost of service, do this. Obviously, we didn't tell the machine what to do if there is no value or no cost of service. So come down below your cost, just write down an if statement to identify what the machine does if there is something went wrong. Inside your parentheses, here is where we're writing our expression, or basically make sure if a machine faces this section, what to do. So here we have to identify the cost equals to null. Basically, we're telling the machine whenever the cost is null or is empty, just return means the instruction means exit the method without executing the rest of the instruction. That means whenever the user, just let me bring it up, whenever the user leave this section empty and the press calculate button, that means the value of the cost is null, and that is where we return. That means we stopped running the program or executing the codes after this return. So let's try our application again and to see if everything works perfect. Here we put our cost of service in $10, calculate the application, and if you see here, everything works awesome. So take off the value of the cost of service and test it again to see if we're still having a crash. If you press on calculate button, the tip amount still is sticking on $2, but luckily the app doesn't crash. But here, if you see the tip amount is still in $2, which that confuses the user. But we know this $2 is come from that $10. And here we have to fix this tiny bug as well to make it more user-friendly for our user and stop confusing them. Here, let's fix this error or this bug here. Come to your if statement where you identified if the cost of service was null, what to do. Come down here, just write down the bending, just write down what the codes I'm writing, and then I will explain to you what happened. Text tip amount dot text equals to empty string, semicolon. Here we used our bending. The tip amount was a text view which it shows the amount of the tip that the user is going to pay for the service, and here is the text which we converted that text view to a text, and here we identified as an empty. Here is a great example to tell you a little bit more about null and empty. Here we told the machine always keep this section if the cost of service is null, empty. And the null means there is no value. No value, that means there is no input, there is no entry in the section we are going to have. But here we actually handle it, and we are telling the machine to keep the section empty if the cost of service is null. Our application is ready to test. Just put the price of the service and calculate a button. As you see, the user can see the amount of the tip that are going to pay. So let's delete the cost of service, and whenever the user click on the calculate button, there is empty section. You learned how to debug and how to debug your application. That's it for this video, guys. I hope you enjoyed it and had fun to find out about bugs and how to do a debug. And if we are going to recap our work today, we obviously learned there is 3 types of bugs we have in our software development. The first one, which is very obvious, and it will be identified by your workbench area. The second one are unseen errors, which you don't see any issue in your source code, but when you are building your application, the system throw an error. And the third one, which was one of the difficult error, was logical error. And as I mentioned, there is no issue in your source code, there is no issue during your building time, but the result is different from what you expect from your application. Obviously, in this project, we faced a logic error because obviously we didn't see any error. The app built safe, but whenever there is a twig or there is a twist in your application, our app crashed and it stopped working. And we were able to fix it and debug our application. That's it, guys. We finished for this video. If you are new to this channel, please make sure you subscribe to our channel, like the video if you enjoyed it, and write down in the comment section if you have any idea or if you have any question to make our upcoming contents even better and more efficient for you guys. Thanks for your time and watching. See you all next week.